Hey, what's up, guys? It's Dave, and you're probably wondering why I look fancy. And the answer is I feel fancy today. So I wanted to talk to you, just totally unscripted, about a win that I have had over the last few weeks with one of my properties, and that is a refinance on my 10 unit. Now, I promised you guys the numbers when I was talking about this on Instagram the other day, and I want to give you the numbers, but in true Marine Corps form, the bank sent the check to the wrong mailing address because I moved, and when I called and changed my personal banking address, I guess it didn't translate into my business banking address, even though I only have one account with this bank. And it got sent to Hawaii, and of course that guy didn't see it or something, and the post office didn't forward it, and because it's a cashier's check, I gotta wait 90 days till I can cancel it and get a new one cut, and it's only been like 45 days. But I didn't want to just keep waiting to post this video, so my numbers are going to be rounded off because I don't have the check, and the refinance documents are in Missouri, and it's really not important whether it's $7,000 or $7,014 or whatever the number is. But the point here is how powerful long-term rental properties can be over even just a short period of time. So I bought this property, well, let's back up. In November, December of 2017, I sent out direct mails. I found a list of properties on listsource.com. I was looking for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Knowing that I was going to be home in the December timeframe, I sent out some letters, right? I hand wrote them all, which, long story short on that, I will no longer do that. I will print them, make it kind of look handwritten. I'll sign my name, and I'll definitely always handwrite the front of the envelope, but I won't be handwriting 120 letters again. That was just, it sucked. My hand was like frozen, and it took me like almost a week. It was just terrible. So I'll go more into direct mail again later. I've touched on it before, but I'll go way more into the psychology there and ways to get your mails open. But this guy calls me and he's like, yo, I got a duplex and I don't want to sell it to you. So my first thought is like, well, why are you calling me then? This seems like a waste of time. He's like, well, I got a 10 unit. If you want to talk about that, ears perk up. I'm like, yeah. So we go. I was able to see 2 of the 10 units while I was home. I only got to go by once. I got to like walk the exterior of the property, see 2 of the 10 units, and then I was like, that's enough. Ran the numbers, knew the numbers were pretty solid. These are Missouri prices. So it was listed at $250. I offered $225. Well, I offered lower. We went back and forth, whatever. It ended up at $225, and they were all about it. And so we got this thing for $225,000 for 10 units, which is a good deal, but yeah, it's Missouri prices, so it's not as good as it might sound if the properties were rented for like $1,000 each unit. And when, due diligence, my property manager went through and my contractor goes through, so they bid it out with the inspector, so they go through during inspection. So the property manager sees everything the inspector says before the report even comes out and knows what the handyman can fix and what the contractor needs to fix, the contractor who happens to be there. And so what we ended up doing after taking over is the property manager fixed most of the interior stuff, like small things, and the contractor, buddy of mine, fixed the exterior up a little bit, made it look a little nicer, spruced it up. All in, did not spend too much money on the renovation of this property. I don't know, 5-10 grand maybe. Well, when we come to closing, so it was going to be 80% bank financed, 10% seller financed at 4% interest with a 5 years to repay it. No craziness in there, not even really amortized, just normal pay down. And then 10% out of my pocket. When we came to closing though, so I keep getting there, getting ahead of myself. When we did the repairs off the inspection, they decided that they would rather drop the price of the property as opposed to just giving me cash back or fixing it themselves. I don't like when a seller fixes stuff themselves. It might not be quite up to the quality I would want, but I also can't upgrade hack. So if a furnace needs replaced, the seller will replace it with the cheapest furnace possible. Whereas I will be happy to spend another $200 to $400 to get a more efficient furnace in there, especially on an older property like this where I'm paying utilities and doing rubs to bill it back out, because that means that the expenses will go down over the long term and that $200 to $400 will actually repay itself. Now, again, I'm not spending all that money just to get a more efficient furnace, but if I already have to replace one, a couple hundred extra dollars is okay if the long-term efficiency gains are more important. So anyway, so they decided to take the price just off the purchase price. And I guess someone forgot to tell the bank. So we get to closing. I'm back in Hawaii, so I'm not even there. And I get this phone call that's like, hey, the bank showed up with too much money. So you can either like postpone closing for them to figure it all out, like maybe a week or whatever, however long banks take, get a new check and come back to closing. Or you can run to the bank, get less money for the down payment and close as is. Like, oh, less money for the down payment. I'm in. So we ended up at like 4.9%. Like it was like 10,900 or something like that. It's under 11 grand that I had to put down to buy this property. And we closed, I want to say it was February 28th. So 2-month process, like 60-day closing period. And we closed February 28th, 2018. And I got it for $212,005, $10,900 out of pocket. Less than, that's less than 5% out of pocket. So good deal, a little over leveraged, but the numbers were right. And over the last 18 months or so, we increased rents a little bit, put some RUBS out, which is ratio utility billing system, to have the tenants pay some more of the utilities. Haven't fully replaced it yet, but a decent amount. And we got some of the utilities back. So cut some expenses, cut some other expenses, and we spruced it up a little bit. And we upped the income from around 4,400 gross to around 4,800, 5,000 gross for the whole property. And we did some other stuff here and there. And I know how low interest rates have been lately, so I decided I was going to look into a refinance for a couple of different reasons, but one of which just being that if I could get rid of the seller financing, I knew I'd lower my payment a little bit, and I knew I could get a little bit of cash back. And what really mattered was my balloon on this property from the bank was a 3-month balloon when I closed, which is less than ideal. And so it was like, I don't know, 16 months left, whatever that is. And I didn't want to have a property come up for balloon not knowing exactly what the market's going to do. So I wanted to push that out. So I got it pushed out, fixed rate for 5 years. Now, the rate is 5.25, so it's not any better than it was originally. It's really not amazing, but it's not bad for a 10 unit. And it's fixed for 5 years. So until 2024, I do not even have to worry about a balloon payment or anything. I just got to make my payments. And this is beautiful because, for one thing, refinances, the money you pull out is not taxed. It's your money already. So that's nice. So we did this refinance. First main win here is that the property appraised for $252,000, which is actually less than it should appraise for, but apparently it's a little normal for refinances to kind of come in lower than they might, because it should probably, I kind of thought we got robbed on that, but it really wasn't worth fighting because I got all the numbers that I wanted out of the refinance, so who cares? Even with the lower appraisal, we only, at this point, when I refinanced, my loan only went up to 190 is what I took out. So I have 62,000 in equity there that I did not have when I bought the property. When I bought it, it appraised for like 235. I got it for 212, so I had like 20,000 in equity at closing. It might have been a little bit higher appraisal. Now, between debt pay down, seller financing payoff, and the property appreciating, I have 62,000 in equity. So essentially, 5.5 times, 6 times what I originally put down on the property in equity 18 months after closing, which is pretty solid on its own. But when I refinanced at 190,000, my total PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment came out to like $1,535. Now, it was like $1,527, so I mean, it went up like $13, but I was able to take that money and pay off all of the seller financing, which is good for two things. Number one, I now have almost $200 less in monthly payments because I'm not paying seller financing. Number two, in less than 2 years, I paid off a 5-year loan, but when we did it, we just asked what principal is left. He gave me the number, I paid it off, which means that I dodged 3.5 years at 4% interest, just gone. So I got a discount on what I owed him because I didn't pay any of the extra interest back. I only paid the interest for that 18 months. So that's key. So really, it was like I didn't do the math, like a 1% interest over the course of the loan, or the amount of the loan. So it's really not bad. And then, so my payment is now $200 a month less. I have $62,000 worth of equity in this property, which means I have more leverage. And after the seller financing is paid off, I get a check for $7,000 to do whatever I want. So recap, seller financing paid off, $7,000 in my pocket, $62,000 in equity, and not a penny of my money left in this property. Not to mention it was cash flowing. So I'm getting an infinite return on a property that has gone up 6 times in equity since what I originally put down on it. And I got money back out of it. And it cash flows. And I cut my payment all in 18 months. That's pretty powerful when you think about it. That's like $70,000 between equity and cash back with a lower payment that's still cash flowing out of my 10 grand that I originally put in. So I wanted to just kind of tell you guys that story, which is why I'm all fancy, because I'm doing fancy things with my refinance and my money. because that's the power of the long-term real estate game. Every year I pay off almost $10,000 on that property, just equity, on top of the cash flow I'm getting, on top of all the other benefits like depreciation and everything else that comes with owning a 10 unit. So although I wouldn't consider that my best property, because it's way more of a headache than some of my other ones, really not that bad, it's probably my best property because the amount of money that I put into it plus what I'm getting out of it is stellar. So guys, that is a little bit about the refinance that I did on my 10 unit and the power of real estate investing. Now, if you got something out of this video, I'd love it if you hit that thumbs up button. It tells the YouTube algorithm that I told you something useful. And if you survived this long, it lets me know you survived this long, which is awesome. So thanks for sticking it out and hearing a little bit about my story. I've got some other properties that I'm debating refinancing or maybe lease option selling, and I'm going to keep kind of sharing these slow wins with you guys through my journey. And my plan with that $7,000, since some of you guys are going to ask, it's really exciting, pay off some credit card debt because I'm flipping a house and I used some credit card debt for some of that, which is fine, but until the house sells, I'm paying interest on it at a pretty high rate. So I just want to mitigate that as much as possible so that I can continue to save more and more and more. So when the house flips, and I pay off, anything else I got, I've got the most money saved and left over to roll into the next house flip. Although this one's actually turning out to have been a longer process than I wanted to, so I might be able to refinance almost right away. And I may just do the BRRRR with this one as my first BRRRR strategy, depending on what the rent comes in at, what I think I'll be able to rent it at versus what I think I'll be able to sell it at. And we might be finishing up in December, so it might just make more sense to get a tenant in as opposed to try to sell it in the worst time of the year. So depending on how those stars align, that $7,000 will either get rolled into a new flip or be saving capital because I BRRRR'd and didn't get maybe all my money back until I save up a little bit to buy the next property. And that's kind of what's going on with me. So that's the normal day-to-day real estate investor Dave side of things. And I would just like to point out that through all of my real estate investments, and I don't talk about this enough, I'm always putting in at least 5%, probably closer to 10% into my TSP to reap the match because I did go with the blended retirement system. And I want to just point that out because a lot of people forget about that. But that's always, always growing. My TSP portfolio grew over $7,000 this year passively, like very passively, because it's set up and I just leave it alone. So I just wanted to point that out because people forget about that sometimes while investing. So if you're still active duty, definitely take advantage of that. It's just an added bonus and it counts towards your cash reserves for investing. Now that's a little bit about what's going on in my life. I'd love to hear what's going on in your life. Comment down below with something awesome that's going on in your life, or maybe with a problem that you're facing with real estate or investing or life in general. And in some of my future videos, I'll pull some of those comments and I will answer your problems, help you give you a solution. Or if it's kind of more personal, I'll just reach out to you and we'll talk one-on-one. So comment down below, smash the like button, have a great day, and buy you some real estate.